Hey gang, Kevin here, Life22. And it's another beautiful morning. While I was doing some of my prep work, you can hear the birds just a cheeping away, and it doesn't sound like they're muffled by the fall of rain or any of those other things. So it's starting to look like a good sign that spring is upon us. So I want to start us off this morning by discussing some key terms. As most of you know, our channel has, in the past, kind of defined some basic terms when it comes to birthright citizenship and things like that. But what I'd like to do is I would like to come on and kind of walk through some basic terms that a lot of people don't know, right? Like, a lot of people go, well, I was assaulted. Were you? Well, that's pretty easy because assault has nothing to do with physical touching, right? Assault and battery is where someone comes at you in a menacing way, threatening to cause harm, or they verbally state that they're going to cause harm, like I'm gonna attack you, and then they proceed to attack you by making physical contact, at which point you have battery, right? So those are some of like the basic terms that people are like, I was assaulted, like, oh, you were threatened to be hit? I'm like, no, they touched me. Like, well, okay, so you were battered. Like, that's like, because you know, if like, I remember being in high school where somebody's standing next to you, and, like, or they come up to you nice and soft, like they're kids, right? So they're like, I'm gonna pull one over on this guy. I'm gonna punch this guy, and I'm not gonna like let him give him any cues that I'm gonna punch him. And kids are really good at this, because I remember that, like, these kids just walking nonchalantly in the hallway. They would even be pretending to be talking to somebody else. They'd be talking to the guy next to them, and the conversation wouldn't be about what they were gonna do, and then they'd strike you in the hallway, just out of left field. Like, they would get real close. Once they were inside your guard, they would jam you the ribs or something along those lines. And a lot of you out there are like, Kevin, that's just sounds like it's just something that happened to you because, you know, you look like you were a target of bullies. Well, you may be right. You may be right. But what I would also, you know, like, that would be just like in the definitionally, that's what I would discuss as battery. It would not be assault and battery. It would not be assault. It would just be battery because you were just battered. There was no threatening motion of battery. Now, you could make the claim that, like, this type of behavior was definitely premeditated. It wasn't like, hey, I went to talk to this guy and then he started insulting my mother, and you know what I mean? Like, so I wham. Like, premeditation means that, like, you know, like, you've got it all planned out, and if somebody just said something about your mother and it offended you and then you decided to strike them, well, that's not premeditation. I mean, I guess if you were to narrow the scope of the timeline down to, the moment he made fun of my mother, I started to premeditate, even though it was a half a second, and then I struck him, right? I mean, I guess it comes down to the gray area, but that's what judges and lawyers are for. So, I'd like to talk about the term detained and detainment. Those are going to be the first couple terms. So, the state of being held in custody or confined, often temporary, by law enforcement or other authorities, usually for questioning or investigation without necessarily being formally charged. Right? So, and detainment is the action of or process of detaining somebody to coordinate or to the condition of being detained, often implying shorter or less formal restrictions of freedom compared to arrest or imprisonment, right? So imprisoned is the state of being confined into a jail or a cell as a punishment followed by a conviction for a crime typically involving longer terms of loss of liberty under formal sentencing. So that would be post-trial. So I believe the definition would also be, like, you know, pre-trial as well. Like, if you were being, you know, held without bail, or held and you were held with bail, but no one came up with your bail money, then I would surmise that you'd also be imprisoned. These are one sentence definitions, so it's hard to say all circumstances that would apply. We could ask Grok the question. Waiting for speech to text to apply to tools. Web search. Oh man, you can restrict it right down. Oh, that's cool. Um, Anyways, basic ones. So, arrest, the act of taking a person into custody by legal authority, typically due to suspension or suspicion of committing a crime, with the intent of bringing them before court or legal process. So, I guess you could be arrested and in jail, like and imprisoned, right? Like, but it seems like it's a longer form, right? It's not just like. So one of the questions I did ask Grok was like, so a traffic stop is a detention. Like, yeah, you're not formally arrested, you're not formally charged. You may be charged with a violation or cited with a violation, because then it gets us into the next one, which is a violation: act of breaking or failing to comply with a law or rule or regulation. It can also be referred to infringement of someone's rights, right? So, uh, and then a crime is the act or let's see here, the act or omission that is prohibited and punishable by law, typically involving harm to an individual, property, or society, as defined by judicial legal code. So, and an offense and a violation appear to be the same terminology. Custody, the state of being held or guarded by authorities, either physically, in detention or in prison, or legally under supervision, often restriction of freedoms. Incarceration, confining someone to a prison or a jail, typically as a result of a crime conviction synonymous with imprisonment, right? So, just a lot of different terms here. So usually when you commit a crime, it is a misdemeanor or a felony. They're actually criminal offenses versus a violation or an offense. So you're out taillight, even speeding within limits, right? Like, they're not crimes, they're violations, right? Parking tickets, seatbelt tickets, all those little things. So when you get pulled over in a traffic stop, you're technically being detained and not arrested. And that is one of the questions we ask Grok just to get some clarity. You are being detained. Are you being arrested when they're handing you the citation? Like, no, you're not. You're being cited and released. It's a process typically free to leave after receiving your ticket. But you are being detained because you're being kind of like pulled from the entire use of your freedoms and rights to, to pass freely and to travel and to move about, right? So they're kind of like plucking you from reality, if you will. Like, they're just kind of plucking you from the normal day-to-day of your freedoms to discuss with you a violation, infraction, whatever, and then you're given this cite and release, right? Here's your notice of violation. You did not commit a crime. Depending on how egregious the crime is, depending on the state, like New York State, you can damn near do just about anything. And, sometimes it involves an arrest. You're taken to the station, fingerprinted, booked, because you've actually committed a crime. But like that's the kind of the protocol, right? So if you've got a driving while intoxicated, in most states that's a crime, and so now you may not be able to walk free, especially given the current conditions. Like, this is where things get muddy because you may not be capable of driving. Like, it's not like the cop say, "Hey, you've been drinking." Like, "Oh, you got me. All right," and you just pressed reset on you because somebody forgot to do it before you left the bar, and now all of a sudden you're ready to go. Like, nope, you need to sober up. Like, we're gonna leave your car here and wait for a tow truck unless you can get someone to come get it. If the cop really wants to be like a jerk, they can like demand that a tow truck come right now and impound your car. Like, there's a lot of different things that can happen. But like, you're in no condition to drive. Like, depending on the BAC, like, they might. I don't normally hear of this. Normally, you're taken to a station and charged formally. But a lot of cops have little like little printers and stuff for basic violations in their vehicles. The same way that like a cop walking the beat, right? Like sometimes they have little handhelds that they can print you parking tickets and whatever else, but sometimes they don't have that stuff, and in order to get you the violation, they have to take you into custody, detain you. Still not maybe considered an arrest, but they may have to detain you to take you to the station or have you follow them to the station because it's such a minor violation, so that they can write you a formal, give you the formal documentation, the court date, all that other stuff, and give you and process you. And so that is something that that like needs to be taken under advisement. So, and all these definitions and stuff lead us to what happened to a gentleman named Carlos. And I would love to say I'm going to come on here and mess with Council President John Crawford and get in his head and say that it's all his fault that that Carlos was deported yesterday. So he was the gentleman that was at the Common Council meeting. He was so I kind of want to do I kind of want to do a brief explanation of what happened. And like I said, I would love to just come on here and be like, point at John, and just kind of mess with him. And also because I know him personally, and it's fun to mess with people that are your friends. Like, oh, what did you do? Like, I didn't do anything. And it's one of those things. And I'm sure he's taken a lot of grief over this, and I've seen a lot of people call him out and say that it's his fault that Carlos is being deported. But I'm going to make the case that as funny as that would be to a friend to continue the joke, right? That's not the case. So Carlos was asked to stop speaking at the Common Council meeting. He had spoken. He was comfortable in his chair, and then all of a sudden he came up with props after somebody else had already spoken to try to get his additional time or get additional time. And John he smacked the gavel. Council president smacked the gavel. And this happened the previous council meeting as well, where no one really listened to him. And it was like, it makes a fool of the council. It makes a fool of the law and order that they try to strike in those chambers, and just, nope, I'm done with this. Have him removed. And you can hear it in the video that he says, have him removed. And I'm not going to get into the amount of people that just kind of made sure things didn't come out of hand. I do want to review the video on the show just to kind of show some things that I would have done or wouldn't have done, or and then again, I'm also not a law enforcement official either. So, but he was removed from the room. I don't think John realized that it was going to involve a disorderly conduct. And a disorderly conduct is a violation. It's not a crime. And so what happens is most of the time, court security and cops on duty that are helping out and assisting in the council chambers don't have little parking ticket meter readers and be able to print and scan you a ticket. So for a violation of a disorderly conduct, they take you down to the station, which is pretty convenient because it's like 100 feet down the hallway, 150 feet away, you have the police station. So it's nice and easy. They can go to a computer, they can have a nice piece of paper being printed for you that gives you a court time, court date, all this other stuff, super handy. It's not handy for you because you're being detained, right? You're not being arrested, you're being detained, and especially because they're not going to arrest you over a violation. A lot of times when they take somebody into their custody to do something like this, they're going to just make sure, hey, does this guy have any outstanding warrants, things like this. They just do a quick check. I believe it's New York State only that they do it in. They don't. I'm sure the federal government in New York State don't get along that well to be sharing that kind of information. So I'm sure it is reciprocal, though. I'm sure that New York State stuff is visible to the federal government, but not vice versa. I'm sure that you can't at a local police department look into federal warrants and things like that. I'm sure that's not, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's a hierarchy. So, but with a violation, they just kind of check to make sure they don't fingerprint you. They're not doing a lot of these different things. They're not, you know, uh, while you might be in handcuffs or whatever, and that's more for like officer safety. Like if it's not just a out headlight. If you had to be asked to leave, a public hearing, I'm sure that they're going to take you as a slightly higher risk, maybe not as high as a domestic violence case or something along those lines. But there are protocols to follow, right? And there's safety techniques to take in, and handcuffs don't kill people. So like I wouldn't, you know, you're in the custody of law enforcement. So like it's not like you're in the custody of the cartel. Like it's people need to kind of relax a little bit. So now what happens is that since it's not a crime, they're not going to formally put your name and social and fingerprints and all that stuff into the database. They're just checking to make sure you don't have any outstanding warrants. Like, hey, we accidentally picked up a guy and we released him. Like, they don't want that to happen. So on a base search of New York State, outstanding warrants, criminal activity, whatever, like, this guy's wanted for, questioning on something that happened. I believe the guy's from Jamestown or like had been currently residing in Jamestown. And, come to find out that he's newly residing out in Salamanca and has a job there. But it also come to find out he's also like on a visa, or maybe on a visa. Like it's so. But here's something that I would like to point out to everybody who may be missing the ball on this is that you're taken in, you're given a violation ticket, you don't have any outstanding warrants that anybody can see, because otherwise you would be arrested potentially or held for a longer period of time until that you can be transferred to that agency to execute the warrant or whatever. So then you're then you're let go, right? So, but then everybody on social media and on this side the side of the aisle that was there that night is like, free Carlos. This is ridiculous. Some people don't understand that he's not currently like rotting in a jail cell. Like he was released like that moment. Like he went down there. There was no fingerprint. He just handed his violation ticket, an appearance ticket to go to court. Blah blah blah. But everybody is posting it over and over again. People are calling the news stations and they're posting his picture everywhere. Well, like, I'm sure to some degree, depending on the level of security, there is like AI scrubbing the internet for government agencies looking for facial recognition and on high level criminals. I'm sure guys like Carlos aren't there. But when you're looking across the social media, like I've seen Carlos's face like 90 times in the last like 10 days. On different posts and things like that, and people complaining about it. And it's like, you know what? These different like ICE agents, Homeland Security, just all these big federal agents, FBI, CIA, these people are like, they don't just have offices like in DC, like they have offices in Buffalo. And when you create enough noise to put Carlos's face on the Buffalo News, and he may have an outstanding warrant, and that's what it sounds like. He's wanted for questioning. Was his visa expired? Well, then, yeah, he has no right to be here. He was given like a temporary restricted right to be in our country. If he has a visa. Maybe he's here illegally in the first place and he did something dumb and he got put on somebody's radar. I mean, there's a lot of different things. We can discuss it further as more information comes to light. But I did want to point out that like the fact that the council president clobbered his gavel at Carlos and had him removed from the room did not cause him to get tossed onto a government database to get found out by ICE. I'm more than certain that the council president or the council as a whole or the city administration didn't just call ICE on the off chance that this guy who doesn't seem like English is his first language, I'm sure that nobody called ICE. Like, and I know that's probably one of the 10% of the argument out there. Oh, they probably called. Like, that's people's backup argument. Like, no, nobody has time for this. Like a lot of times, like when something like this happens, you just ignore it as a politician because it just dies down, and like, so by them calling ICE in, like, that's not letting it die down. That's not letting it like kind of fall by the wayside. People get hyped up about stuff, and then like you can come back to them later and talk civilly with them, but it's like people don't want to talk in the moment. They want to yell in the moment, and so you just kind of step out of the moment to let people kind of calm down, and then you can step back in, right? Like, you want to have the situation de-escalated, and calling ICE does not de-escalate the situation. So I highly doubt that anybody called ICE. So like, let's just throw that stupid notion out the window. It's most likely that you guys have been creating such a huge noise on Carlos's side in his defense that you've actually didn't realize that he was in trouble for a bunch of other things, or was wanted by ICE for whatever, which is still being in trouble for a lot of other things. Like, trespassing is illegal, and that's what he was doing if he was on a violation of his visa. And by you guys plastering his face everywhere, it's like, oh, hey, some agent in Buffalo was like, I was just given a dossier. It's one of the 50 people I have to try to find because we have outstanding dossiers on them, and we have to try to, like, do whatever. And you're like, huh, who would have known? Oh, let me do some research. He seems to be in the Olean area. You start calling around. Oh, he works at a little diner in Salamanca. Like, okay, hold on. Let me call over to OPD or SPD. Yeah, Salamanca Police Department. And they come in, and they detain him, and then he sits in. He's now formally arrested, not charged, just arrested, while he waits for whoever is coming to question him, right? And that's how it works. And so he may be released to his own recognizance. Maybe it was just some simple form. He just like, hey, you didn't sign the renewal form. Like, you sent in the check for the extension on your visa, whatever. Highly doubt that's the case. But most likely it's hey, man, your visa expired. We sent you notices to your last known address that you're required to leave. So, but with that said, guys, I hope to dive in this weekend into that other footage and kind of get you my take on the council meeting before this coming Tuesday's council meeting. But with that said, we'll catch you guys next time on Life 22.